After leading a Tibetan Buddhist community that enabled abuse by the teacher, and after untangling the subtle distortions in their understanding of the teachings that allowed such enabling, I found myself sitting with a difficult paradox. How could a system that had failed so profoundly in its ethical foundations still contain practices that were, for me, deeply transformative? I explore the community dynamics and distortions in my book Fallout, but the question that lingered long after I left was more intimate. Why did the Vajrayana practices themselves work so powerfully, even when the container around them was compromised? I realised the depth of their impact one day while I was sitting with a group discussing death and dissolution. As they spoke, I realised that none of them lived with the awareness of impermanence in the way that I did, because none of them had spent 3 months, literally 3 months, contemplating the inevitability of death every moment of the day and night, as I had during the Vajrayana outer preliminaries. No matter what one thinks of the religion or its institutions, the practices work, at least they did for me. And we'll look at why they don't for some later on. But after leaving, I wanted to understand why they worked, without relying on the religious language, metaphysics, or cultural framing of Tibetan Buddhism. I wanted to see the practices from the outside, through a different lens. So I turned to Jungian psychology. After all, those deities, are they not archetypes? Let's take one of the simplest Vajrayana practices. The practitioner imagines a deity floating in a vast blue sky. As they recite a mantra, healing light flows down from the deity into them. They may imagine others around them receiving the same kind of light. And at the end, the practitioner flies up into the sky and merges with the deity. Finally, they dissolve from the outside in and disappear into nothing. Now, from a Jungian perspective, this practice is rich with psychological meaning. In Jungian terms, this practice takes place in the imagination, the realm of the unconscious mind. It's a kind of a waking dream, similar to Jung's method of active imagination, where symbolic images arise and the practitioner interacts with them consciously. Let's break down the elements. First, deity as archetype. In Jungian psychology, an archetype is a universal pattern of human experience, a symbolic form that expresses deep psychological truths. The deity in Vajrayana practice can be understood as an archetype of the fully integrated self, the wholeness that lies beneath the fragmented ego. The deity is not other, it is a symbolic representation of the practitioner's own potential. This is the way Vajrayana works in a Vajrayana viewpoint. The deities are our own Buddha nature reflected. Right. Now let's look at the sky as the unconscious mind. The vast blue sky is a classic symbol of the unconscious, spacious, open, beyond the limits of the ego. Placing the deity in the sky situates the archetype in the realm. The vast blue sky is a classic symbol of the unconscious, spacious, open, beyond the limits of ego. And placing the deity in the sky situates the archetype in the realm where transformation occurs. Now let's look at the light as psychic energy. The healing light flowing down is a symbolic transmission of psychic energy, vitality, clarity, compassion, integration. The mantra acts as a rhythmic bridge between conscious intention and the unconscious response. Now let's look at merging with the deity. Flying up and merging with the deity is a symbolic identification with the archetype, a temporary recognition that the qualities of the deity, wisdom, compassion, clarity, are already present within the practitioner. And then we have the dissolution. So dissolving into nothingness is crucial. In Jungian terms, it prevents inflation, the ego mistaking itself for the archetype. Dissolution returns the practitioner to spaciousness, humility, and psychological balance. This cycle, invocation, identification, dissolution, mirrors Jung's understanding of how one safely engages with archetypal forces. So why does it work? Here's the Jungian explanation. So this is the part I've been contemplating for years, right? Why does such a practice bring the practitioner closer to their fully integrated or enlightened self. So here's the Jungian answer. It creates dialogue with the unconscious. Active imagination opens the channel between the conscious awareness and unconscious material. The deity becomes a symbolic mediator between the ego and the deeper self. It also allows safe contact with archetypal power. So archetypes are potent, and engaging with them directly can overwhelm the ego. Freak out, right? But Vajrayana practice provides a structure, a ritual, and containment which makes the encounter safe. Now, it also strengthens what in Jungian terms is called the ego-self axis. So in Jungian terms, psychological health depends on a strong connection between ego as in our everyday identity and the self as in our deeper wholeness. And this practice strengthens that connection. It also integrates dissociated qualities. So the deity embodies qualities that the practitioner may lack or repress, like compassion, clarity, courage, spaciousness. By identifying with the deity, these qualities get integrated into consciousness. It also trains the mind in symbolic thinking. Symbolic thinking is essential for psychological growth in Jungian terms. It allows us to understand ourselves in deeper and more nuanced ways. It also regulates the nervous system. The imagery, the mantra, and the dissolution all have calming, grounding effects. This creates the physiological conditions for psychological transformation. And that's looking at it from the view of Jungian psychology. But here we get to the point where Vajrayana and Jungian psychology diverge, the realm of the shadow. Jung famously said, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." So this raises an important question. If Vajrayana emphasizes watering the seeds of joy, focusing on the positive and ignoring the darkness, as in general Buddhism, does it fall short in Jungian terms? I believe the answer is yes, because that's how we end up with gurus who can guide students in transformative practices while remaining unaware of their own shadow, unaware to the point where they can abuse students and see nothing wrong with it. Now, if that's not an unintegrated shadow, I don't know what is. So practices can be profoundly transformative, but without shadow work, they can just become spiritual bypassing. Jung would say, you cannot become whole by ignoring the darkness. Just look at these Tibetan Buddhist communities who have abusive gurus, and nobody's actually said, you know what, there's something here we really have to look at. And it's not just, oh, yes, we didn't warn people that they were going to be abused. No, it's a bit more than that, guys. Anyway. This leads to my final reflection, and that I believe that it's possible and deeply valuable to integrate Jungian active imagination with Vajrayana practice once the Tibetan religious baggage is removed. Now, this is not to diminish either tradition. It's not to blend them into something new, but to allow them to stand side by side, informing each other. Vajrayana provides the powerful symbolic practices, a ritual structure, transformative imagery, and a deep familiarity with impermanence. Jungian psychology provides shadow work, archetypal understanding, safeguards against inflation, a secular framework, and a language for integration. And together, I think they form a really good functioning whole, because in Jungian psychology, if you do active imagination without a good strong structure and a way to not become identified, with the archetype and go off into life thinking, I'm the Buddha, yeah, it can be problematic. So together, I think they form a way of engaging the imagination that's both spiritually profound and psychologically safe. And this is the path I'm exploring. A contemplative, symbolic, psychologically grounded way of meeting the self, big S, through imagination, ritual, and honest shadow work. It's a way of revealing the mystic within without losing sight of the human who walks the path. Let me know in the comments what you think of this idea of a Jungian view, taking a Jungian view of Vajrayana and looking at it from outside without the baggage, without the cultural baggage. And of course, if you enjoyed this video, do the usual follow and like and share and all of that kind of stuff. And enjoy a moment of blissful forest peace. Catch you next time.